Hi guys. Before we get into today's video, I just want to say a quick thank you to the Patreons that I said I was going to do a shout out to. So I can't believe I have this many to say, but there are 5 lovely women that I would like to say thank you to. So we have Susie Martin, Teresa Clancy, Maria H, Breed Nagel and Michelle Larkin. So thank you. Yeah, I mean, people might think 5 isn't a lot, but it's 5 more than I had. And I suppose it's like, I don't know, just thank you, because I suppose it's like an extra approval or like show of confidence, if I'm making sense. Yeah, so it's just really appreciated. So to get into today's case, it is about how the justice system failed. And by justice system, I mean the Gardaí, the actual judge and courts, not only once, but twice. And this allowed a monster to go on to murder. So we're talking about Sylvia Burke today. So to be honest, I couldn't find a lot of information on her. I found out that she grew up in Cooney and that she later would work at the Globe Bar in Cecil Street. I know that she has 1 brother and 1 sister at least, because there would be news articles about them. Her father is John and her mother is Esther. Sylvia would go on to marry Lorcan Roach Kelly, and they would live in Ballintee. And so they had 2 children. I think her son, Shane, actually could have been from a previous relationship, but when our story takes place, he is 13, and then they have a girl, Aisling, and she is 4 years old. Sylvia opened the Miller Gallery in 6 Mile Bridge in County Clare. This sadly closed then in 2007. Could have been with the lead up to the recession. But Sylvia continued to work then from home in this business. Now, her and Lorcan would actually go on to separate, and I don't know whether that was before the business closed, after the business closed, before she even opened it. Again, there isn't a lot of information, to be honest. On December 7th, 2007, Sylvia went out with her sister and a friend to celebrate her 33rd birthday. They went to Limerick City, and the 3 women went to a couple of different pubs, and then they ended up in Ted's nightclub. And it is here that she met 23-year-old Gerard McGrath. Before I continue our story with Sylvia, I want to go back and tell you a bit more about Gerard, or I believe he went by Jerry. So Jerry was 23, he was unemployed, and he was from Ballywalter, Knockavilla in Tipperary. So the same year, on the 30th of April, McGrath was in the Headford Arms Hotel in Kells, and he came out and got into a taxi and gave them directions to go to his sister's house, and this was in Cavan. I feel like if it was in Dublin, let's say, that seems like such a thing to go from Dublin to like Wicklow in a taxi, or Kildare in a taxi, or Meath or something. But I think maybe the more central counties, maybe even because there wouldn't be as much business as, let's say, Dublin, the taxi drivers would go further. It was 2:15 a.m. when he got into the taxi of Mary Lynch. So he gave her directions to go to Virginia in Cavan, and when they got to Virginia, he directed her to go down like a dark cul-de-sac, and he didn't appear to know which house he was to tell her to stop at. So eventually Mary, I think she was like, could have even been thinking that he was trying to avoid the fare. So she stopped the car outside the next kind of like a random house and just said like, that's €32. So McGrath gets out of the car and heads around to her. And so she actually lowers her window to like take the money off him, thinking that that's, what he's going to do. And instead he pulls open the door. I'm just going to quote Mary herself, and I'm going to put up some photos just from the assault, so just be warned if you want to kind of skip forward or anything, because they are, injuries from the assault. He had drink taken, but he wasn't falling down drunk or anything like that. He got out of the car and he came round to my window, which I opened down so that he could pay me in through the window. But instead, he opened the door of the car and he just went berserk. He went mental. He started kicking me. He pulled lumps of hair out of my head. He bit me. I was black and blue. I had black eyes. My neck was all bruised. All down my sides were all bruised, black and blue. I was screaming. By the time he came around to the door, his fly was open and he was trying to get my head to his body. At this stage, I was in a bad way. I was very scared. I thought I was going to be raped, murdered, or both. He was trying to get me out of the car. He was trying to get my seatbelt off me, but I kept my hand on my seatbelt so that he couldn't open it. He had the keys of my car at this stage. So the fact that he had his fly open, I think we can all kind of, see where that might have been going. Mary then says that she somehow manages to calm him down. And from reading this, it actually makes me feel like it shows how unstable he was, that he was able to just simmer down from what he was physically, like a vicious assault. I had deodorant in the glove compartment of my car and I got it and I sprayed it into his eyes, and it seemed for ages before it actually reacted into his eyes. Somebody up there was taking care of me because I calmed down, and when I calmed down, he calmed down. And then he started saying sorry, and I said, "Thank you for saying sorry to me. Why don't you get back into the car? Give me my keys and we will go in and get coffee and I will get you some help." All I needed to do was get out of where I was because nobody knew where I was. He kept apologising, but I could feel at this stage that he was getting aggravated. So as I said, I feel like he went up to here, he started coming back down, and she could feel him getting up. And that was, I don't know how long the attack lasted, but this seems to have all been happening quite suddenly. So she goes on to say that he does get back in the car and she actually does drive them back into town. And as they're actually going in, she picks up 2 more people, like for a fare. And I would assume that, she was doing this kind of for the safety, maybe, because if there was more people there, maybe he wouldn't do it. But I'm surprised that he was okay with her picking more people up. I had a bite on my shoulder which was broken. It looked very disgusting. My neck was all bruised from where he had his hands around my throat. The guards came into the hospital and they took 1 evidence bag full of hair, and my husband took a bag of hair out of the car later on. She would go on to say that basically, obviously, now she was very nervous and hurt and, shaken after the attack. But that going forward then, she would only take passengers who she knew or who were referred to her by people she knew. I don't know how, obviously, then she just drive to the guard station, but Gardaí arrest him in Virginia, and Mary obviously goes off to get medical attention. And one source says that Mary then would later say that she was surprised that before she had even given her statement, he had been released. So essentially, the station gave him bail, which, to be honest, I didn't know. I wouldn't have thought was a thing. I didn't know they were allowed to do that. And so then it would be on the 17th of May that he would appear in Virginia District Court. And he was remanded on continuing bail. Now, as I said, this was a violent assault, but it was put down as into pulse as an assault. And I've read that it should have been assault causing harm because that's the more serious charge. And so because it said assault, I don't know, this must be the one that people are more likely to get bail with. There was also talk that it was kind of put down as, not paying a fare, that there wasn't any real thing. It was just that he was trying to get away without paying the fare, which again would be a hugely lighter sentence or lighter charge than assault or assault causing harm. She was in bits. McGrath would be ordered that he had to stay at his family home. Mary would say that she was concerned that McGrath had something about women and was concerned that he would come back and attack me or some other woman. And McGrath seems to have behaved himself until October, when he would commit another crime, which I think was definitely escalation. In the early hours of the 9th of October, McGrath had been drinking. And at around 3:30 a.m, he went into a home in Dundrum in Tipperary through an unlocked back door. Some sources say that he had a hurl. He made his way through the rooms. He went into the parents' room, and then he went into one of their 2 daughters and took the 5-year-old. When she woke, he put his hands around her throat to stop her from screaming out. He done this with such force that blood vessels in her face would burst. He then essentially just put her under his arm and walked down the stairs. Her mother, luckily, heard this movement on the stairs and went down and caught McGrath trying to take her daughter. Her husband had also come, so he managed to get his daughter off her, and then he managed to get him to the ground and hold him there until Gardaí came. So a neighbour was a Gardaí, so they obviously called him first, and he was able to arrive pretty quickly. I don't know how anyone could make that out like that wasn't a very severe thing to do, to try take a 5-year-old. Like, what did you think he was taking her for? Like, they weren't going to go out to the back and play like a tea party. McGrath would tell the Gardaí that when the girl woke up, he panicked, but he told them that he had intended on taking her from the house. However, the court would later hear that he had not entered the house with that intention. When this was first entered into the pulse system, it was described as a youth found in a home. There was no mention of him trying to take a child. I'm just going to read some of the dates from the trial then, or the court case. So on the 10th of October, he appears at Limerick District Court and Gardaí object to bail and he is remanded on custody. On the 23rd of October, he appears in Tipperary District Court, but again is remanded in custody. And on the 30th of October, there's a bail hearing at Limerick District Court. Gardaí object to him getting bail, but they do not include the fact that he is on bail for the assault in Cavan. They don't bring that up. And whether that's because they're not aware of it, or I think it's more so because it had been played down that it wasn't like a vicious, violent assault. And so they never brought it up. So they did object to bail, but they didn't kind of put all the facts forward, which could have helped. And so on the 30th of October, he was granted bail. On the 12th of November, the DPP directs that more serious charges be brought in relation to the Cavan incident. So essentially, not just assault causing harm. On the 3rd of December, the accused is charged at Virginia District Court with assault causing harm, among other offences, and he is remanded on continuing bail. There is no mention about his remand by Limerick District Court. 4 days later, Jerry McGrath and a friend are drinking all day in Limerick. At this point, McGrath is on bail for a vicious assault in Cavan and the abduction of a 5-year-old, or the attempted abduction of a 5-year-old. Instead of heading home later, he decides then he's going to stay in the city in the Clarion Hotel. So him and his friend head off to Ted's nightclub. Sylvia and McGrath meet inside and they begin chatting. There's not a lot of more information involved inside the club. However, it is said that Sylvia then agrees to go back to his hotel with him. CCTV would later show the two walking back to the hotel, holding hands. It wasn't a long journey, and they arrived back to the hotel at around 3 a.m. The following afternoon, McGrath had still not checked out by 1 p.m. Usually checkout's 11. And so staff kind of become suspicious, and I'm sure they just think that it's someone is still asleep, or, they're just taking the piss when it comes to checkout. So they head up to the room. And when there is no answer, they go in. And here they would find blood on the bed and on the carpet. And when they go into the bathroom, they would find the body of Sylvia lying in the bath, naked, bloodied towels up by her head and shoulders. CCTV would later show that McGrath left the hotel at 11 a.m. He got a bus back to Cashel in Tipperary. He signed on at the Garda station. And then he left Ireland. I have read that he left and went to London, and I've also read Scotland. But ultimately, he came back himself after a couple of days. A news article on the 11th of December would show that the Gardaí were working on the theory that maybe she had met her killer online. However, on the 12th then, the news articles would show that they had a man in custody. And they would report that he was out on bail at the time for a violent crime. Postmortem revealed Sylvia had been savagely beaten and strangled. She suffered a broken nose, there were fingertip bruises to her arms and thighs, a severe laceration to her vagina and compression of her neck. She suffered a vigorous and serious assault, and the cause of death was manual asphyxiation. Gardaí would find DNA to show that there had been sexual activity, and McGrath's fingerprints were found on the bath. He would tell Gardaí that they had sex, and that after this, during a discussion, he became enraged by some comments. One source says that it was when he told her about the abduction that she became like disgusted, as he would, and that this was what enraged him. Like she became repulsed, obviously, when he told her like that he had tried to abduct a child. He admitted that he hit her in the face, pulled her hair, that he put his arms around her and strangled her in the bed. It says that he then moved her body to the bath. He also says that he may have kicked her between the legs with some force. So that could explain the laceration, because I just want to make the point, and I feel like I don't have to because you all seem pretty sound, but I'll just make a point. Whether like her going back to the hotel and then whether the sex was consensual or not, I lean to it being consensual, and there's no problem with that. There doesn't seem to be any indication to them trying to say that it was a sexual assault, so I do believe that it was two adults that had gone back to the room and had consensual sex, and it was whatever happened after that, and that's that. It's not relevant, essentially. So I'm sure you know what I'm getting at, so I'm sure people won't be dicks in the comments. Her husband Lorcan would say that when he went to identify her body, she was so badly beaten that it was her hair that he recognised. And he said, she was so badly beaten, it is an image that will remain with me for the rest of my life. On the 14th of December, Sylvia's funeral took place in Killeen Cemetery in 6 Mile Bridge in County Clare. Mary would say that she couldn't believe it when she heard that, firstly, that he had been given bail, McGrath had been given bail, but also he then went on to attack, like, because she heard obviously about the abduction and couldn't believe he was on bail, and that he then got bail again. And she says that when she heard about Sylvia's murder, she knew it was McGrath. Okay, so I'm just going to say in a very simplified nutshell that these cases were one of the reasons why whistleblower Maurice McCabe came forward about the behaviour in his district. And this would lead to loads of, it was a big thing, like it led to loads of inquiries. There was the Higgins and Gearan report. There was like resigns, like the Minister for Justice Alan Shatter had to resign, and then the Garda Commissioner Martin Callanan, I think it was, he had to resign. Like it was huge. I think even the next Garda Commissioner eventually had to resign. It was just a lot. It was a lot of controversy. It was a lot of there was a lot of incompetency, but then there was also people saying, that there was like injustices. And so the fact that Jerry McGrath was able to go on and murder a woman after the two serious crimes, would be one of the main sticking points. So I'm just going to read some of the information kind of relating to that. Again, if you want to look it up, it's Maurice McCabe does the Gearan report, the Higgins report. If you just put in Maurice McCabe, you'll get all the information. I actually have his book, I just haven't read it yet. But yeah, like he was treated so badly after he came forward with all the stuff, which I will talk about a little bit. But if you want more information on this, go read it, because it's a lot. So just some of the stuff that was in Gearan's report. However, there is no document that Gearan could find which showed either the Virginia District Court proceedings or any bail bond entered on the 17th of May. Gearan says he was referred back to station bail when he inquired where the conditions for McGrath's release came from. But station-ordered bail has no power to impose such conditions. So another thing was that Mary kept getting told, like, when to do her case like that, the file is with the DPP, but essentially it turns out to be that it still hadn't been sent to him by the time the abduction takes place. Gearan couldn't figure out why it took all that time. 5 months passed before an investigation file was prepared on the alleged offence. Gearan couldn't figure out why it took all that time, and why the only statements taken were of Mary Lynch and her husband, as well as individual Gardaí. This, despite the testimony of Mary Lynch that she managed to calm McGrath down and get him to allow her to drive him back and stop to pick up 2 further passengers. Mary would ring the Garda station about all this, and she was never able to speak to the investigating officer. It gets worse. So her court case was on the 7th of January 2008. A Gardaí phoned her and told her that it wasn't going ahead the day before, right? Told her it wasn't going ahead, so that, she didn't need to go. Because Mary was very clear that she wanted to go and that she wanted to make a victim impact statement. As this Garda rang her and told her it wasn't going ahead, but it did go ahead. And she only found out when a Garda called her to say that her man had been sentenced to 9 months. As you can assume, Mary was very upset because Mary said she wanted to be there. The Garda said, "He's still here in the station if you want to see him." obviously she said no. So in that court case, there was no recorded victim impact statement from Mary Lynch. And on the 16th of December, she had made it clear to a Gardaí who recorded it that she wanted to be there to make her own impact statement in person. And that wasn't even noted in the court case. McGrath pled guilty, and then that got 9 months. Mary was basically, I don't know who said it, but it is, I did read in one of the sources that she's made to believe that it was Maurice McCabe who not only was the one responsible for letting McGrath go from their station, but that he was also the one who rang her to tell her that her case was not going ahead. So this is some of the stuff that then was done against Maurice McCabe, basically by his colleagues and by people above him and stuff. And so I think after everything was gone and all this came out, Mary rang Maurice McCabe, got in touch with him, whatever way. And she says that as soon as he spoke, she knew it wasn't him that had called her. So then it's who did ring her to tell her not to go, and who gave the order to tell her not to go. The following year, on the 12th of January 2009, McGrath pled guilty to the murder of Sylvia Roach Kelly. I'm not really sure whether he only pled guilty at the last minute, because a lot of them seem to do that, or if he was always intending to plead guilty. He would obviously receive the mandatory life sentence, and Justice Barry White would say that even with the benefit of hindsight, it was difficult to avoid strong feelings of frustration and anger over how matters were handled by An Garda Síochána. The failure to advise the judges on all relevant issues of bail in relation to the Cavan and Tipperary incidents was both negligent and disgraceful. The following month, on the 13th of February, he would receive 10 years for the abduction. He also received 8 years for another charge and 4 years for something else. So you would think so we got over 20 years. Not really, because they were to be served concurrently with his life sentence. So, I don't even see the point of, I feel like it's just, I get that it's nice for the victims to be he was charged and he was sentenced to this, it's some sort of closure for them maybe, but all of this, he got 10 years for the abduction. Yeah, well, that's added to the life sentence, which he's probably only going to do about 20 years for. So, it's not really, it would be different if it was 20 years for life and then the 10 years, so that would be 30 years, which is what should be getting done. It's just, I feel, and I said it before, I feel like it just gives free rein to do more then, because you're well, I'm getting life and that's all I'm getting anyway, so, do whatever. In May 2014, Sylvia's husband, or estranged husband as they say, would go on to try to sue the state and the Garda Commissioner, because he basically said that while McGrath was allowed to be out on bail, then that he was allowed to go on to murder Sylvia. In January 2015, however, the case was struck out. The reports, from what I can tell, and again, as I'm saying, this is simplified, I haven't really done a lot on it. I believe they found there was no wrongdoings, in the sense of there was no, corruption to it, just incompetence. In an article from December, actually just gone, in 2022, Sylvia's family said that they were happy that there had been a U-turn on a decision to allow a Christmas visit for McGrath and his family outside. So it basically says that it would have been in a supervised, neutral location in Kildare, but that then they changed their mind on it, they went back. It's part of a Section 39 visit, under which a prisoner may have a supervised visit on compassionate grounds or for the purpose of assessing a prisoner's suitability for early release or for facilitating his or her reintegration into society. That doesn't seem promising, does it? We're now in 2023. He's been in custody essentially since 2007, the end of 2007, but 2007. So what's that, 16 years? So, we're coming up there anyway. Sylvia's brother would say, "How could you leave him out? I was distraught about it. He has the cheek to apply for a Christmas visit with his family, while my sister's kids are going into another Christmas without their mother." Mary Lynch would tell News Talk in 2016 that Sylvia is dead because they didn't handle my case correctly. She would even go on to say how she feels guilt over her death. She believes that for An Garda Síochána to rectify their mistakes, that better training have to be given to the younger members of the force. She felt like a lot of the younger members were just you know, put out there unsupervised, not really properly trained on stuff. And so that this was kind of why some of the mistakes were being made. And she says, quote, "The arresting Garda in my case was, according to him, the only Garda available within 2 units to drive a squad car." And like that, she says the young Gardaí are not to blame, that it's, you know, the people above them. You have to blame the people above them who are supposed to be training and supervising them. That's the bottom line of it. There is a woman dead because of it, because of the incompetence of these people. So you used to be allowed to, if you got 14 years or more in prison, after 7 years you were allowed to apply for parole, which is just wild. Like when you think about it in terms of like life, okay, fine, life, so you're allowed to apply, which is still mad after 7 years. But if you've only gotten 14 years, you only have to have done 50% of your sentence for you to be allowed and say like, oh, you know, like, can I get out? Which is madness. So that has changed, thankfully. I think it could be 12 years now. I'll have a look. But anyway, it doesn't count for the people who are from before that. So he was allowed to apply for parole after 7 years. And so we applied kind of after 7, 8 years in 2015. And as I'm sure you know, the family are allowed to, you know, like write letters or say something on the day. So Sylvia's parents, John and Esther, would say that their lives were changed forever, that they, you know, missed her obviously every day. And her dad would say that, like, you know, because she used to call down, you know, to see them and stuff, that sometimes when there's a knock on the door, for a second he still thinks like it could be Sylvia. And I get that. Lorcan would say that their son, Shane, was autistic, and so that he needed, you know, consistency, and that like the only constant in his life had been his mom, and just like that she was gone. He says that his daughter has anxiety and suffers from nightmares every night. He would say that he lost a woman that he loved and that he had left his job to take care of the kids. And as I had mentioned before, so Mary says that she has panic attacks and that she can only take people now recommended to her. So as much as we might say, well, her assault happened in 2007, you know, she wasn't murdered, it wasn't a sexual assault, so, you know, kind of like that, it was like, that's it, done. It's not. Something like that would affect you forever, obviously, like for the trauma, and but also then her income is now affected. If she won't take, or can't, if she can't take people that she does not know because of the fear, the anxiety, the stress, the panic attacks, her income is affected. So her life is still being affected. So guys, that is the tragic murder of Sylvia. Be sure to let me know what you think of the case. I mean, I think we're all going to agree that he should have been, you know, in jail from the first offence. And we see this often, like this is what happened with, you know, I can't remember his name right now, and I don't really care about remembering his name. The murderer of Manuela Rito that I done. It was one of the first cases I done. If you haven't watched it, you can go back. Although there is details of sexual assault in that video, so just be warned. But I do like give it a time mark to skip past it. He was out on bail, and like that, if he hadn't been out of it, and I mean he was out on bail and got lenient sentences for violent crimes, and then like that, because of that, he was able to go on to murder. And we do see it, you know, that this happens where it's nearly like a permission. Like even only the one recently that I done for Sarah Nelligan, like her fellow was out on bail and she didn't even know. And you do hear about that. There was another case recently where her ex-boyfriend, when I say recently, in the last couple of years, and her ex-boyfriend murdered her. And he had charges for like assault against you know, an ex-partner kind of thing. And like that, these women are going into these relationships and not knowing who these men are. And I know they were kind of saying that there should be some sort of, I don't know, system, records that you can find these things out. I don't know. Let me know if you think that would be right, or is that some sort of GDPR thing? Yeah, let me know what you think. I will also have another video out, so that will be another murder case, and that will be for the Patreon only, guys. So if you want to check that out, if that's something you're into, you can go, the links and all will be below. So yeah, we will leave it there. I hope you all have a lovely weekend. Take care. I hope the sun is going to continue to stay. And yeah, take care. We shall see you in the next video. Bye.